need you there. I'm sure Gary's gonna have a great time. Thank you. I have to run. I got another prior engagement.
Thank you very
Have a
much
Good evening, everybody.
for all the work that Il Circolo does for us. Thank you. So now we're starting the academic part of our presentation with a presentation with 4 guests titled From Liguria to the World, Marino Magliani, the novelist, who went from the verticality of his town and his region to their horizontality, the horizontal spaces of the Netherlands. That's where he lives now. And the speakers for the speakers for now are, I lost my card, my notes. I lost my notes. Emanuele Pettener, who is assistant professor of Italian and writer in residence at Florida Atlantic University and specializes in modern and contemporary. In particular, in kind of American literature. Zachary Scalzo, the current artist in residence through the University of Central Oklahoma's Department of English. He's a writer, a translator, an educator who has worked throughout North America and Europe, earning his MFA in playwriting from the University of Calgary School of Creative and Performing Arts in Calgary, and he's a graduate of FAU, undergraduate and master's. Anthony Tamburri, the Dean of the John D. Calandra Italian American Institute, Queen's College, and Distinguished Professor of European Languages and Literature, editor and author of more than 30 volumes that I will not list now. And Marino Magliani, author of 16 novels, 4 graphic novels, poems, short stories, and tens of translations from Spanish and Dutch. He is translated in many languages, French, German, Dutch, Romanian, Polish, Spanish, and Danish, and now in English. And this is our presentation for tonight. His novel titled Window to the Wijk, translated by Zachary Scalzo. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. You can all hear me? Hear me in the back? Let me just start by saying that it's wonderful to be back. We recognize when I first came here, there was an Italian-American president. Now I see another Italian-American president. We can't complain about that. Also, I want to give a special shout out to Dr. Miriam Ruthenberg, because if it weren't for Miriam's insistence in the fall of 1999 that I applied for the position of chair, I wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here in this structure makeup. It was also at that time, I think, prescient in some ways for Florida Atlantic University to hire a professor of Italian as chair of a multilingual department. I think before I came here, there was only one. And so hats off to FAU back then, their ability to realize the importance of having a chair of Italian. Anyway, I'm here because I am, along with Paolo Giordano and Fred Gardefei, the publisher of Marino Magliani's first book in English. And we're delighted. Borghi Press was, Borghi, by the way, for those who don't know, is a seaside town on the Riviera dei Fiori, that is Liguria. And we founded it, Paolo Giordano, Fred Gardefei, and I. We founded it, Borghi Incorporated back in 1989, and a year later, Borghi Press. It was total serendipity. However, here we are 32 years later, and a couple of hundred titles more, and we're delighted to have also sort of stretched out into the world of translating or publishing translations of writers from Italy. We had done that, started that at the beginning, but not to the extent that we do now. And Marino, when we novel came our way, we thought it was great. You'll hear about it. It's daring, it's provocative. It is both avant-garde in some ways, but it's also a novel of immigration that I'm sure you never thought about. I don't know if you thought about it as a novel of immigration. But we've been around, as I said, for 32 years. We've been supported by 3 universities along the way, or 4 or 5 actually along the way. FAU is one of them. We're now at the Calandra Institute, and I think that's the last stop for Borghi Press, so that it could live in perpetuity. Oftentimes, some presses like ours that start small are attached too much to individuals. When the individual leaves, the press leaves. We want that to be something different. We have tried to introduce or brand ourselves as the Italian American publishing house. We are, in fact, I would say, the largest Italian American publishing house. There are some that are a little bit more specialized, but ours is much more broad. We vote, and let me just say why Borghi. Because Paolo Giordano was born in Borghi. His family brought him to the United States at years old. He moved into my neighborhood in Stamford, Connecticut. We became friends. We did undergraduate work together. We did the MA together. And really, Paolo and I are brothers. He's the second brother. I have a brother. He's the second brother I never had. Fred, we met along the way in the late 80s. We bonded immediately when we found ourselves in the situation of being told that we should not consider writers Italian American, that we were ghettoizing them. And of course, at that time, we were young and impetuous. And we told people they were wrong. And we hoped that with Borghi Press and over 200 titles that we were indeed then correct. The other reason why Borghi Press is around, one of the first impetus was that a lot of our friends who had manuscripts, creative manuscripts they couldn't place, were being told by established publishing houses that they should probably add a little bit of organized crime and a little bit of theft and a little bit of whatever all'italiana. And we just felt that we had the means to produce Borghi Press. We had great support at the university at that time where I taught, and so we did. So here we are. And here we are with Marino's first of at least 2, if not 3 novels with Borghi Press. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Now, thank all of you. It's a privilege and enjoy, really, for me and for us to have such a nice audience. I have immediately a question for Marino Magliani. Of course, what is Liguria for you?
Good evening to everybody. Excuse me for my movie. Thanks to Ron, thanks to Florida, thanks for the opportunity. Liguria is everything and also nothing. Big contradiction. With one microcosm, one universe. And more than that is the wish to give back to myself as a child the Ligurian rock, the Liguria that we never felt.
What do you mean?
I mean that as a child I spent all my childhood in boarding school. The neighbor, the border with Liguria, but also far away, the region of Lazio. And then I come back, and I was not anymore a child. And even that was really too late because when you go away from one land, you come back later.
And everything is lost.
Totally. Everything is lost.
What did you lose?
I lose the fire of Liguria. I lose the smell of the library, the fullness of the library. I lose the smell of the time, the time,
Il time.
time. I lose the sea, the sea which is a wall, vertical wall up, far away from the coast. I lose all the feelings of the light and the shade, which is the best that we see. That is the best light. Light from Genova to Mattia, the light of the May, the light of the sun. That's the light.
Yeah, and now as a grow up man, what do you feel when you go back?
It's difficult, very difficult. I go to Liguria. My feelings are so strange because I go to Liguria and I live in Holland. But
Yes, that's remember. Yes, you have to remember that. Marino Magliani does not live in Liguria. He goes back to Liguria every summer, but residence is in the Netherlands.
Sure.
You're a Dutchman.
Well, no, I still am a Ligurian, Ligurian power. But well, yes, I live a long time in South America, Spain, and Norway. Then I stopped. I stopped in Holland. Let me say that I don't even live in Holland. I live in one room in Holland. And they are at work. But when I go to Italy, I take aircraft and I stop to eat. So my border is Ventimiglia, and when I go inside, it's feeling that I am this strange feeling, be a clandestine.
You told me a passenger without a key. It's the thing. Passenger without a key.
Is that in Italy we call that the Portuguese, no? So the passenger without a ticket is I feel that I don't have any more right there. But when I am there after 2 months, I get back my right, my power, my conscience. But then I don't feel anymore live clandestine, but as
Is this some music?
yeah, that makes sense.
Oh, you live on Serra?
As a desertore, I live as a desertore instead of the topic of my novel.
Marino, you quoted to me Giorgio Caproni, Life on the Caproni, to describe his feeling.
Yes.
You quoted Giorgio Caproni. You remember those lines?
Yes, I remember that time. Giorgio Caproni, well, as you said before, that is the old Liguria is like big myself. Innocent. And
Maybe all art.
Okay. Yeah. And Ronnie is a great poet from Livorno, from Toscana, but he spent a lot of time in Liguria.
So he had a good time.
Yes.
He had a time.
He's still my child. He take my place. And he said se mi chiedono quando ritornerò, da loro che non sono mai partito.
And this poem is so I didn't know it, and I knew it Marino when we were preparing our conversation. And I think that it's a poem that belongs to all of us. It belongs to many cultures. We live, yesterday a friend of ours said, I live in the ocean between Italian and America. We live in the border. This is the poem. Se non dovessi tornare, sappiate che non sono mai partiti. Il mio viaggiare è stato tutto un restare qua, dove non sono mai. Traduzione: if I don't come home, I want you to know that I never left. My travels have all been staying right here, where I never went. The translator is because it's always important to recognize the art of the translator. The translator is Zach, but it's not this Zach, it's another Zach, Zach Rosa. And the title of the poem is Biglietto lasciato prima di non andare via. No left before. So, were you able to recover your Ligurian childhood through literature?
No. With literature, you have the power and the conscience to get that. Or from one moment, you have even the conscience that you give back inside the right phase of Ligurian law. That's a big power. You write, and you have this big feeling of power, of literature, the truth, when the life is not enough.
And so these, let me talk with our friend.
Before they talk with him, I will thank very much your work. I can't get all the baroque and the perfect.
And the perfect.
Ovvio. Thank you very much, but who reads the book? It's not easy and it's not easy. Okay, it's in a two words, vertical and horizontal. And all my books, because the concept to use to was out
There.
there, and I thank you.
Yes, I have really, I'm not I read the novels that the exact translation of Soggiorno a CY.
They like.
They like. Okay, that is they like. Window to they like is a must. There's another quote. Let Zach decide if your book was difficult or not. Okay. It was. Isaac, what was the most challenging difficulty to translate is the taste of Liguria, but also of Holland in English. So to translate these things,
No, I, in the same way that, Marino, you were saying that the novel itself is kind of a contradiction. I think the act of translation and translating this novel felt very contradictory in its own ways as well. I have said to, I'm sure many of you in this room before, that when I approach a translation project, it's very often that the work itself presents its own metaphor for translation. It, as much as I ask to translate it, it asks me back how to translate it. And for me, with this novel that is so interested in place and verticality and horizontal. Oh gosh.
Oh gosh.
That's what you say, horizontality? I also use dictionaries. When I forget words in English, which are very useful. That is so occupied with the space, with sensation. In a way, the book was asking me to meet it in the way that the protagonist Marino of the novel is meeting the city through the language that he has. There is Liguria, there is VII, there is the cosmos, all of which find their ways to enlace within each other, to superimpose on each other, to converse with each other. And in a lot of approaching how to bring this novel into a form in English, I found that the translation was as much in conversation with the original text as I felt like I was in conversation with Marino and his ideas and moving that across these borders, right? The translation, I think, of this novel in a very ideal sense exists in the same betweenness that the novel is, right? It is an Italian living in Holland. It is also this human living in the universe. It is also the, beautiful, like, Wildian image of, like, recognizing you are in some gutter that's still looking at the stars, right? And that moment of in-betweenness is really what I think I thought to value in it, right? It is that betweenness that we get when we know that, like, our sensation doesn't match our words, but we have to push through those all the same, right? And that, I think, is a big part of how I took on the challenge of writing, translating and rewriting in English is very sensual.
Grazie. FAU student of Italian. You want to?
So, how many people have read the novel? Who's read the novel? Okay. So the novel, this is Emanuele calls it a wild, I think a wild novel in its preface, but I would, and it is a wild novel, and I'll get to that in a minute. But there's an adjective, there's a noun, a label for this novel that we haven't used in decades, and that's the anti-novel. This is very much an anti-novel, structurally speaking. It's a term that goes back to the middle of the 20th century. A French guy decided to use the term with regard to crazy and wild fiction. What it does is it sort of grabs you as reader by the scruff of your neck, and it tells you that you're on a roller coaster, and that's what it is. There are chapters. When you pick up a novel, what do you have? You have chapters that are 10, 15, 20 pages long. Marino has chapters that are 100, 200, 300 words long. And then he's got chapters that are maybe 5 or 6 pages. I think 6 might be the longest. 6 or 7 pages might be the longest. So you're on this constant sort of bumpy ride, in a good sense, but it's a bumpy ride. And you know you're going to be on this sort of bumpy ride or seesaw ride from the very beginning. We hear from the narrator that we're on sand, like sand, living here. It's soft and malleable, sand and marshy. And you also know, as he tells us, that you just can't imagine. And so from the very beginning, we're put on notice that this is going to be a rocky ride. So, on the one hand, it is structurally innovative in that it brings back that notion of the anti-novel. It's a love story. There's this wonderful love story in the middle of the novel that's done basically through writing, which is also nice, and through different languages. And so you get intrigued, and you wonder what's going to happen. Is there going to be consummated or not? So there's that love story. It is, as we heard, perforce, an Italian living in Holland. It is perforce a novel of immigration, and with all that entails, being in a country whose daily behavioral patterns used to customs you're not used to, and harking back to where you come from, harking back to your home country, and you do that with nostalgia. And that's what it is, but it yet is extremely contemporary because it deals with life in these particulars, but obviously life in general. And I remember when we decided to publish it, at first, we were all skeptical. But we read it, we looked at each other with wow, because it is such a wowing novel. As far, I just want to say for Liguria, as far as, and Borghi. So years ago, when you were just about leaving, the little post office in Borghi used to cancel their postcards, not letters, but postcards. When people would send postcards back with this phrase. Per vivere un'eterna primavera non c'è posto al mondo che Borghi. And that is something that Paolo Giordano, I think Paolo's still listening, that Paolo Giordano and I were always reminding people about how great Borghi was. So it's an eternal phrase.
Yes, Paolo Giordano from Borghi, co-founder of Borghi. I think is with us right now. Big abbraccio a Paolo Giordano. Okay, well, I wanted to know, first, the book is safe, okay? And thanks to Borghi Press, the price is usually $18. Today is only $10, so discounted, so, okay?
And the author here
And the other is just for signing the book. Okay?
because when you then give this to your children or to your grandchildren, they're gonna have a signed copy of a book by a great author. Let me say this also about Marino. Marino's penultimate novel finished among the top 12 for the major literary prize in Italy called the Strega. The Strega is equivalent to the Pulitzer here in the United States. It wasn't just nominated, it ended up being among the top 12. So there's a series along the way, a series of judgments along the way that novel had to go through. He made the top 12. Next time.
Okay.
The book will be signed up by the computer. Oh, yeah. Anyway, okay, we still have a couple of minutes. If you have a question, we have our student and translator, Alvino, with a question. Please, Cal.
I really like the love first part brunette red hair, lady Consul. And yeah, I love that part because you really got a window like all the lives that you the love story where they just kind of start around the nothing. And they write big letters to each other. I thought that for me, this book
Thank you very much, Carly. I think that, yes, please. And I think that Ilaria Bob is making my name very seriously. It's okay.
Want to do one conclusive round?
Well, I don't know if there is another question. I think that Spain has another question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that comes right from the Italian, right? Traduttore, traduttore. You know what? I think at the end of the day, the book deserves to be read by people who can't speak Italian. And I mean, like, I think that is something that impels me to share the work that I choose to translate, you know? And I think it's also something that whenever I hear that cited in a context, there's this question of like, oh, well, it'll never like equal the thing. I'm like, well, if I wanted to equal it, I would be writing Serra una volta, not how he started the book, but but I would be rewriting it in Italian in my own hand. And what I can do is I can offer, you know, pick your metaphor, the sound of the ringing of the bell in between the two chimes. I can offer you the mirror. I can offer you the kaleidoscope. And if it is a betrayal, I think it's a necessary one.
Right.
Okay. Another question.
Quick, very quick, very quick. India.
Are you a translator? Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm going to be perfectly transparent with you about the timeline thing. It happened during 2020. It was somewhere between. I'd have to look at my email, which I can do and we can talk later. I can give you that timeline, but our communications, we sent emails back and forth where I would ask things as simple as like, no, this word is very close to this other word in Italian that feels like it makes sense. And he's like, yes, you know, the wordplay. Like, and you know, it was a really gracious conversation back and forth that I've been very lucky. The living authors who I've worked with, I've been really lucky to have those kinds of open conversations with them because we're all invested in the English being as good as it can, even if it is, you know, your apple martini instead of your gin. Yeah. Like,
Thank you. Bravissimi. Thank you for this first session. So the books are for sales, and I think Kali and Cristo were volunteering to just keep an eye. Otherwise, we have the box there. You can put the money in, and we trust you. Yes. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Bruno Benedetti, who is Associate Professor of Mathematics at the University of Miami. Bruno received his PhD from the Berlin Mathematical School in 2010 and held postdoctoral positions in Stockholm and Berlin before joining University of Miami in 2015. His research, funded by the National Science Foundation, is focused on the intersection of geometry and combinatorics. So this is a shooting out from literature and going into mathematics and geometry and landscape. I think it's really interesting. So I open it here?
yeah, sure.
Like this?
Full screen.
Full screen. How do you do that? Oh, okay.
You're the one.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay, I did it. But first I need to start sharing it. Oh. So Zoom, share. Here you go.
Okay, I'll go forward. Thank you very much. So how many of you hate math while I set this up? Raise your hand. Just to know more. Okay, I'll try to be brief. If you don't interrupt me with questions, I'll be 10 minutes long. So there is time for a couple of questions. Don't be afraid. There are no stupid questions, like I tell my students. Just some stupid students every now and then. All right. I'm going to talk about geometry and Liguria. So I'm pretty sure you've heard about Liguria. I'm not sure how much you've heard about geometry. So let me try to make it as fun as I can, given the fact that I'm a professor of math. So I can't be too humorful. So one of the questions that we are asked sometimes, I don't see the top of my screen right now. I don't know why. Can you remove this bar? If I hold it down, it will be down. And
Like
it covers,
this?
no, I don't want it to cover the screen.
It's a Zoom, that's why. I don't know how to do it. Well, it has to go somewhere.
Okay, let's put it up.
Up.
All right, you won't see the title of my slide, doesn't matter. So what I want to talk about is, so one of the questions that we face is who invented geometry? And there's a problem with this question as we don't really know if it's a person who invented geometry, in the sense that geometry exists in nature. Okay, so top of your screen, you see Saturn. Bottom left, you see something that you are quite used to, which is salt. Salt comes in cubes. Salt comes in cubes. Yeah, good, okay. Bees know how to build hexagonal prisms. So it's not even sure that we should credit a person as the invention. So even if you stay within the animals world, bees are very acquainted with hexagonal prisms. At the level of, throughout the history of mankind, geometry always accompanied us. These are examples throughout the centuries of buildings that have all something in common. They're all religious buildings. From a mathematician's perspective, these are interesting because they are polytopes. Polytopes are objects that are convex and usually, if they're regular, symmetric. Perhaps there is a philosophical thought behind it. Perhaps in the moment in which people all over the world wanted to convey an idea of a superior being, an idea of God, of a deity of some kind, they resorted to these two ideas: convexity to give the impression of stability, and symmetry to give the impression of perfection. So, and you can see that this is common throughout, not only throughout the ages, but also throughout geography. The first picture is from Africa, of course, Egypt. Second one is America, Mexico. Third one's in India, Asia. That's Europe. That's a Genoese architect, although it is in Florence. It's a church in Florence. This building seems like the intruder, but if you think about also, this is the financial trade center in Genoa. But if you think about it, the reason why an architect would plan a financial center again as a polytope is, after all, the same, to convey the idea of stability and perfection, as if, you know, perhaps indeed the religion, so finance is today's religion in some sense. Here you see, so geometry and polytopes accompany us throughout the history, and they also, this is somehow, they also will accompany us in the future. The first map here, if you're wondering what that is a Voronoi diagram. That's an extremely useful tool today. So this is an example in which I can explain to you how geometry impacts today's life. This is Italy divided by region by nearest capoluogo. So Italy has provinces. The head of the city heading a province is capoluogo di provincia. There are about 100, I don't know, capoluogo di provincia. And this is Italy tiled up. Each cell, I don't have a pointer, but for example, if you look at your favorite city in Italy, the cell around it consists of the points that are closer to that city than to any other capoluogo di provincia. This is extremely useful, for example, if you're a phone company and you have to spread antennas throughout the city so that everybody's covered and you don't get like antennas to crash. And everybody gets their own phone coverage. CGI is also very important. You had a picture in the beginning from the movie Luca, which is somehow somewhere in the, located somewhere in the Cinque Terre, not very clear where. This is a picture from the mask. CGI uses massively geometry. The G somehow is reminiscent of that. So graphics it uses geometry heavily. This is the internet, perhaps. So if you, I mean, if you think about it, if you were asked what are the greatest inventions of our time, well, if you directed this question at a person maybe 200 years ago, probably by the time the greatest inventions were something technical. So on the side of like improving a steam engine or something like that. But if you think about it, what inventions change your life dramatically in the last 40 years, most of them are actually mathematical. Purely theoretical. Think about Google, for example. That's invented by two mathematicians. Or the internet. That's invented basically by Stanford University. So most of the step forward now is completely on the theoretical side. Think about computer science. So the internet is a network, it's a one-dimensional set of polytopes. This is, and I could go on, this is a picture, these two pictures are supposed to represent optimization and architecture. Optimization is how to maximize a function, essentially. Architecture also uses massively modern geometry. This is why you get to see shapes that seem impossible. This one is India, and this is really a building that stands, it's not a model. This is an actual picture. This building looks like an olive, a Taja olive on a plate, but it's actually stable, although I wouldn't live in it. So what's the math? I'm going to try to tell you in about 1 minute. So what is at least convexity? What is at least symmetry? Convexity is a very simple notion. It's the fact that if you have 2 points in your set, the shortest path is in your set always for any pair of points. Okay? For any pair of points, the shortest path is completely contained in that set. If that is the case, your set is called convex. Here you have 2 examples. The one on the left is convex. The one on the right is not, because there are 2 points such that the shortest path joining them is outside. Yeah, it's faster to pass outside. Whenever you have a set A, you can always encompass it with the smallest convex set. And this is called convex sol. And that is what a polytope is. So in case you wonder what is a polygon, what is really a triangle, it's quite difficult to give this definition. Some child asks you, what is a triangle? It's not very easy because, okay, you have to say, is it some space comprised by 3 points, but also not very clear what you mean by that. So you have to pass through this definition, basically. There's no other way. It's this, a polygon in dimension 2 or a polytope in arbitrary dimension is the convex sol of finitely many points. So that's the smallest convex set that contains a finite bunch of points. Polytopes can be patched together face by face to form tessellations, what somehow you basically have in your bathroom floor, or somehow thousands of examples in art, mosaics are of this kind. Polytopes can be patched face to face and tile space. Again, with huge applications in architecture. As for symmetry, let me very quickly go through this, but we're also at slide 6 out of 7. So you see that I maintain my promise, even if the next slide is somewhat more verbose. So symmetry is the property of an object to stay unchanged under rotations of reflections. Yeah, so there's a mathematical way to define rotations and reflections. They differ. They're different. Rotations is a smaller set. Rotations or reflections, bigger. You also allow somehow mirror images, for example. But somehow the mathematics to define them is difficult, but once you have it set it up, it's very easy to distinguish them. It's about a number associated to a matrix being 1 or minus for rotations or -1 for reflections. These are the pictures of 5 so-called platonic solids. These are the most regular shapes we have from nature. Yeah, these are called platonic solids because they go back actually to the time of Theaetetus, that was like a scholar before Euclid. So Euclid has a theorem about them, but it was not a theorem by Euclid. It was already known. Theaetetus was a friend of Socrates. So we go back 2,500 years, more or less. The illustrations are from an Italian mathematician who was also talented as painter. His name is Leonardo da Vinci. So I put here some math, but if you're allergic to formulas, just skip it. I just want to tell you, each of these objects has symmetry, of course. The tetrahedron has just all possible symmetries that you have with 4 objects. That means basically, if you had 4 cards, in how many possible ways could you arrange it? The answer is 24, if you think about it. And so the tetrahedron has 24 symmetry, which form a group, which simply means that you can compose them and you still would get a symmetry. The cube and the octahedron have more, 48. The last 2 guys have 120 symmetries. So they're even more symmetric, but just because there's more stuff. So I want to, before concluding my very short invitation to some more geometry and also invitation to Liguria, I thought about talking to you a little bit about the people. So because mathematics, after all, is made of very abstract thought, but also of people, essentially. And that is our laboratory, in the sense that there is no, our way to do laboratory is just to travel and interact with other human beings. Mathematics is in the mind of people. It exists in nature, but it's only pursued through talking between mathematicians. Many geometers, many famous geometers hailed from Liguria. Who is the most famous one? I don't know, but somehow in the top 3 or so, I would place Leon Battista Alberti. who was a humanist and architect, and is credited for the introduction of mathematical perspective into arts, with his treatise called De Pictura, of the way of painting. So the name sounds from Florence, but the mother of Leon Battista Alberti was Bianca Fieschi, who had married, first I married a Grimaldi, then was widowed, and then married again a Florentine citizen called Alberti, Lorenzo Alberti, if I remember right. So if you don't remember the history of the time, Genoa was basically divided into two fractions, and there were four main families. Fieschi and Grimaldi were for the Pope, so Guelphs is the technical term. Spinola and Doria were Ghibellines, which means for the emperor. They were cheering for the emperor. Okay, so also the Spinola and Doria family had their own mathematician a couple of centuries later, but so it was worse. Leon Battista Alberti was much better. The title of my slide that you discover right now is Mathematicians from All Centuries and Creeds, in the sense that you can see here also how heterogeneous the job of a mathematician can be as I scroll through all of these personalities. Next one comes Giovan Battista Magliani, who was one of the most underestimated physicists, I think, of the history of physics, in the sense that he published a book called De Motu in 1638, which the motu means of motion. And it contains many of the results of Galileo. They corresponded, they knew one another perfectly well. But the interesting thing is that this book was published before, before Galileo. So usually when this happens in science, one believes independence and one credits 50-50 or so, 50%, 50%. It happens. In this case, it's one of the rare cases in which 100% of the credit goes to Galileo, even if it published after. So perhaps one should revise this. Giovan Battista Magliani, it was also a personality of the politics of this time. He served in the Senate of the Republic. So which republic? That would be the Republic of Genoa. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Italian history, but Italy was divided until 1860. Next comes one of the greatest astronomers of all time from Perinaldo. That's near Imperia. Yeah, it's close to Prelà. Yes, near Imperia. Gian Domenico Cassini, as we would call him, or Jean-Dominique Cassini. Jean-Domenico Cassini is how he was born. Jean-Dominique Cassini is how he died, because he was court astronomer in Paris. That was one of the most influential positions of the world at the time. So he discovered 4 satellites of Saturn. That is why I had the picture up at the beginning. Geppetto, Rea, Dione, and Teti, these are the names he gave. I'm not sure in English how they were translated. And he also discovered the great red spot of Jupiter. How did he discover them? Well, he looked into a telescope. So where's the math? The math is because at the time you had to build your own telescope. Yeah, they were not available at Barnes and Noble. So you had to come up with optics and so create them from scratch. That is why after that you could just look and say, oh, there's a great red spot on Jupiter. And Giovanni Girolamo Saccheri was a Jesuit monk who did mathematics somehow on the side. He's credited as the one of the unwilling inventor, because he wasn't trying to do that, of non-Euclidean geometry. So that's what happens not on the plane, but on surfaces that are curved. If you take a flight from here to Rome, from Rome to New York, and from New York to here, assuming the 3 pilots follow the shortest path, you have a triangle that looks plumpier than any triangle you've seen in school. It looks plumpier. The sum of the angles is not 180, it's much more. That is because you're not in the normal geometry, you're in spherical geometry. So there are different rules if you leave the plane and go on top of the surface. For example, the sum of the angles may be more than 180, or less if it's curved the other way. Cesare Arzela was like an extremely poor person from Santo Stefano Magra. This is Liguria bordering Tuscany, to be precise. The classical Liguria is from Vara to Magra, between 2 rivers. And he's very famous for in geometry for this analysis theorem that is widely used in geometry called Ascoli-Arzela. All schools here, if you go to any undergraduate school in the US, they know this theorem. And last but not least, yes, no, I am done. Last but not least, I want to quote, so in all the century, I've arrived to 1900. I want to quote this guy who actually was the only one of this list who was a professor of mathematics at the university, so long before I, of course, was there, actually, even before I was born. But so somehow he was an algebraic geometer, and he's specialized in the study of symmetry. And there is a surface named after him. The surface named after him is called the Togliatti quintic, the Togliatti surface. He also the head of the algebraic geometry group at the University of Genoa, that somehow, in which I did my undergraduate. The Trovati surface is named after him. There is also a city in Russia called Togliatti, but that's not named after him. It's named after his brother, who went into politics with some fortune. Yes, the elder of you would remember it. With this, I am done. I just want to point you out for you just how the people between math are so heterogeneous between all types of people, a monk, a communist, somehow a person that is very poor, a person that is extremely rich, one person that ended up working for the emperor, another person that ended up being Guelph, so pro-pope. Mathematicians can be born out of anywhere, essentially, and we all work together. We try to stand one another, but somehow. These are all the contribution that I could find of Liguria to geometry. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much. And now we have another presentation by Stanislao de Marsanich, who is one of our international guests. And Stanislao, his degrees are in comparative constitutional law. He's an expert in geopolitics. And in the last 10 years, he is the president of the network of literary parks that joined more than 80 communities in Europe from Norway to Sicily. He is also a journalist and the founder of Park Time magazine. And this is the final contribution for tonight before we all go to the theater and see the young students with Giorgio first. We have also to give a little. Cosa? Ah, ok. L'hai già trovato?
Copy?
Non so cosa sta succedendo. Infatti.
Molto gentile, sinceramente. Copy?
Sai, ma perché dopo ti spiego perché poi sono veramente terribili le distanze.
No, 11 ore.
Infatti, bravo.
Scusami.
Here it is.
Ok. Dove posso parlare? Okay. So, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm sorry too for my English, but I'll try. I wrote a bigger presentation, but now I am using a shorter one. The bigger one I will use it for the poor students on Monday. And let me say to you, thank you very much, to thank the president of the Florian Atlantic University, to thanks, let me thanks Ilaria, Emanuele, and everybody, everybody. And let me tell you that I'm from Rome, and I'm coming. I was 3 days ago in Abruzzo, in Pescina, which is nowadays candidated to become one of the one of the 10 town candidates is now between the 10 town candidates to become capital of culture in Italy, which is quite strange because Pescina is very small. There are 2,000 persons living there. And I'm very happy because we are here in front of Mr. and Mrs. Santomaggio, who are coming from there, who are living in Miami. So for me, it's an honor, it's a pleasure to have met you, and I'm very pleased about that. I'm sorry for my English, but I'm sorry too because there is the jet lag who is working on my head. So I will start. What are literary parks? And come funziona qua? That's right. Literary parks are 33 places all over Italy, in Norway, and now we are planning to do 2 literary parks in France and in Belgium, and perhaps in the United States, you never know. and there are places who has been source of inspiration from writers and poets. There are not places as Disneyland of literature. There are territories. So there are municipalities, 70 municipalities over Italy and Norway, 16 regions. So we are present in 16 regions all over Italy. We have Istituito, where started 6 literary park with 6 national park, which is important because we are linking nature and identity with the instrument, which is literature. And the same 6 regional natural park, for example, the natural park of the River Mincio, which is the place where Vigilio has been inspired for the bucolic and Georgica. So one of the first natural treaty was ever been written. And the network involves a lot of people between residents and visitors. And every year we reach quite 1 million persons. And this is a statistic more or less true, because we don't utilize the statistics from the Cinque Terre in Liguria, because they are too big, because in Cinque Terre were 5 little villages where lives, I think, more or less 6,000 persons. Every year arrives 4 million persons to visit. So they are not coming from only the literary park, but a lot of them come from that. And every year, so we do as a network more than 500 events, but they are not the specific things we do, because the literary parks as a system, I will explain better later, works every day. So that we work with the schools, so we work with the university. The place was been a source of inspiration of, for example, Carlo Levi for the Cristo si è fermato a Eboli, for Grazia Deledda, Nobel Prize to Canne al Vento in Sardinia, to Francesco Petrarca in Acqua Petrarca in Veneto, and for all of the other writers, for Paolo Pasolini near Rome. We do a lot of events, but every day we can do some works, some work with the students for university and presentation. So we do a lot of things. We work together. I'm sorry for this introduction, but it's important because nobody knows very well, me too, what are literary parks. So we work a lot with the United National Commission for UNESCO, because we try to utilize the literary park and literature to know the heritage, so the material heritage in Italy and not only. And with the Carabinieri, with this part of the Carabinieri, we who have the responsibility of the natural place. So i Carabinieri Forestali e Agroalimentari, which was before the Corpo Forestale dello Stato, and now they are Carabinieri. And we work a lot together with the Carabinieri, and specialmente in Liguria, at the Cinque Terre National Park. To other things, but very even in Cinque Terre National Park and all over Italy, we do a lot of, even as a network. The most important of them are the Day of Literary Parks. We do it in October, and the other one is the Day of Poetry and the Day of Forest. The Day of Poetry is from UNESCO. Is the 21st of March, and in the same day, the United States has promoted the Day of Forest. So we do them together. We do a big event all over Italy and Norway, of course, and together with the Italian Commission for UNESCO and with the Carabinieri Forestali, which is very important in the sense that we are reaching now, because one of these examples we are where we work together with the Carabinieri is in Liguria, is a area in the place where Eugenio Montale in his childhood has been inspired for a lot of his masterpiece of with which he has reached the Nobel Prize, more or less, and so you know better than me. So the literary park Eugenio Montale delle Cinque Terre has been been done with the national park. Has been made with the national park for one reason, and this reason was not a touristic reason. Was a natural and educational reason, which mean that Cinque Terre has not, they don't need to have more tourists because they've got a lot of visitors, but they need to educate the residents and the visitor to the fragility of the territory. Cinque Terre is a fragile place, as most places of the Liguria, but they are very fragile because there has been is not artificial place. As you know, they have been on the terraces that has been built for an agricultural scope goal. So in 1,000 years, the landscape of the Cinque Terre has been completely modeled. I'm sorry, thank you, by the hand of the man. And Montale in the 20th century has been inspired in his childhood and later for his poetry. So we utilize the poetry of Eugenio Montale to educate the visitors and the residents to the importance of knowing the fragility of this place. But the Cinque Terre is very near to the Golfo dei Poeti, which is perhaps better known, was perhaps better known. Now the Cinque Terre perhaps better known than the Golfo dei Poeti, but it's a place very important for the inspiration, as a source of inspiration in Italy, and well known in every part in the world. But you know, Byron, Shelley, and other Virginia Woolf too has been inspired by the Golfo dei Poeti. Montale is quite different because it was the place of his childhood, and so he tells us that the strongest, la durezza del paesaggio has been very important to his poetry, and which is strange if you think about it, because if you know the poetry of Montale, it's very linked, of course, with his interior sensation, but it's very linked to the landscape, of course. It's impossible here to do a lesson about the Montale poetry, but for example, it's important to give an idea of his interior life with the stairs. The stairs of the Cinque Terre, the path, everywhere. Here there are some examples of our works we do with the Carabinieri Forestali all around the Cinque Terre path. But there is a lot of other arguments, of course. But everything that you read in his poetry, which is a big resume of interior sensation, but you can find somewhere in the landscape, and you can interpret it with your sensation from Monterosso al Mare, where there was the Villa Montale, where it grew up, all'ombra, ai versi, con al versi all'ombra del gigante. But all the five villages of the Cinque Terre has got a lot of this kind of sensation. I try to cut that Eugenio Montale explains you by his poetry. With the Carabinieri Forestali and the National Park, we are working a lot about some how do you say, some materia, and one of them is the agricultural one. It's important to that we are working a lot with the agriculture, with sorry, that's right. That are very well described, of course, not only by Montale, but in a big part of Italian and Ligurian literature. But the fact that the literary park, and I try to close, is very important to educate to the fragility of the territory. As Montale with his thirst, as Montale with the history, with the word, the wall, described the fragility of the territory of the Cinque Terre and described the work of the people. It's important to note that because in this period, the big affluence of tourism in its contrasense is paradossalmente non mi viene la parola, sta modificando il paesaggio, is changing the landscape because nobody wants anymore to work the land. So this is the main problem. After in occasion of the 40th anniversary of the Nobel Prize to Montale, and in occasion of the 20th anniversary of the institution of the National Park of Cinque Terre, we published a book that I leave you, Ilaria, here with the poem of Montale and the photograph of Barontini, which is a great photographer, and with the ringraziamenti, the thanks of the national, of the president of the National Park, who is Donatella Bianchi, you know, the journalist, and there is something I wrote me too, insomma, is a book that I give you. And here there is some photo of the book captured during the vendemmia. That's right. And which is one of the strong period of for me of every of the Cinque Terre. The Chaquetrai is one of the wine that the people produce in the Cinque Terre. It was a wine, not only the Chaquetrai, very well known. I'm sorry here, you cannot read, but was very well known by other writers as Gabriele D'Annunzio, Montale, of course, Giosuè Carducci, and Giovanni Pascoli. My families come from Lucca. We are known as very strict, and Giovanni Pascoli too was from there, more or less. And he asked for a lot of wine of Chaquetrai in the name of the Italian literature, but just because he wanted to have un regalo, a present. But anyway, and it was a place where the wine and the landscape was very well known by Francesco Petrarca too. Is a work of 1,000 here, Il terrazzamento delle Cinque Terre, and the fact that the literary park is helping the national park to preserve the fragility of this place is for us a very big honor. And I finished that with some photos for us about the walls. So I think everybody knows the walls of the Cinque Terre, I muretti a secco, who are the leitmotiv of the of being a UNESCO site, and they are very present in the poetry of Eugenio Montale. We are finishing, of course. This is the last. There are the terrace and some poetry of Montale. And here there is the last slide. There is the Golfo dei Poeti, Lerici. As you know, the Liguria, we heard about that, is a land of poets, is a land of writers, and it is impossible to make here an anthology of the writers of the poets from Liguria. But just a few meters from the Cinque Terre, we can find Byron and Shelley too. Shelley the Gulf of Poets was the place where Shelley take the boat and he died, and the place of Virginia Woolf and Lawrence in their travel. So you can come. We have finished. Thank you very much.
Okay. We have one question if you have for geometry or for the literary parks. And in the meantime, Giorgio, we do one little come here. So any question for our two speakers interested in the geometers of the Ligurian country or the literary parks, which is a very beautiful way of doing tourism. So if you're interested in doing different kind of tourism that's also literary, please talk to Stanislao. Yes, one question from Manuela. It's also important for us because we're doing a class now in the poetic geography of Italy. So it's very touching for us. It's very important as a topic. Not yet in geometry, but we will maybe start with that too. So one last greeting is to Giorgio Brignetti, who is an entrepreneur who left Liguria and went to Brazil, where he opened a fazenda. And in the fazenda, he produced coffee. So we would like to know one memory of his travelers as a Ligurian in Brazil. And then you're all invited to the theater where the students are already trembling, waiting for us. So we'll do one more greeting to Giorgio Brignetti.
Good evening to all of you. Thank you for sharing this little chat with me. I was born in Camogli, that is a tiny city close to Genoa, and everybody working the ships there. Everybody's master or salesman. So my destiny was to be a captain as well. That was not my vocation. So I found a job after I became a captain, and I found a job. The first one is was in a coffee trade. That was my second great love of life, coffee. The first one was my wife. And coffee is a very interesting product. In 1960, when I started working, you can imagine that you need 70 barrels of oil to buy one bag of coffee. Now we just need 2 barrels to buy one bag of coffee. But the time was very important commodity. So I started selling coffee all over Europe. Then after a few years, I've been promoted, let's say, in buying coffee. I moved to Africa for a couple of years in Congo, Uganda, Ivory Coast, producing country. And then finally in 1970, they sent me to Brazil, where they have many interests in coffee. And I was able to open a company for myself and to become a farmer producing coffee. and exporting coffee, of course. In 1992, for a twist of fate, I left everything and I came to the United States and I started selling ice cream, Italian ice cream. And then we opened with my wife a company of real estate and mortgage. But the most important that after over 60 years of working and running, I learned to live, I think. So I built a house in Camogli, where I come from, and I paint on the wall, what they call a meridiana in Italian will be, I think, is called sundial or sun watch, something like this. Sundial. And I wrote on top, "Vivere memento," that is a Latin sentence that means learn, remember to live. And it's something that I wish all of you, that might be many of you, they know better than me, but the few they don't know, maybe they can learn to give a lot of value to any day and any hour of your life. Took me 50 years to learn this thing, running back and forth, and finally, 15 years ago, actually, I started learning living, where I can use my time now to read a nice book, very interesting books that I stay for 50 years, and good food and good Italian wine. And that is my experience.
Vivere memento. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
So after speaking so much about food and wine, let's all go to Theater 2. Follow me, and then we'll have the reception outside, and you're all invited to stay. And thank you for the people who are at home. We'll leave you now. Good night.